Hello and welcome to the show. Today you're in for an exciting treat because I have a wonderful guest here today. We're talking about all things leadership, which is extremely important in the time that we live in today. So I'm really excited to have him on with us. I'm going to give you a little bit of his bio and then we're going to get right into the conversation. But Don Schminke is the author of the best-selling book, The Code of Executive, and has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. He's an award-winning speaker, researcher, founder of the Saga Leadership Institute, and delivered over 1,700 speeches. So we're certainly excited to have him here with us today. Don, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So Don, as we get into this, let's kind of set some framework. As I open this, we talked about the fact that, again, leadership is extremely important. Your target customers could be CEOs who want to learn management strategies and leadership development, employees looking to move slowly into leadership roles, or those who may be graduating. Of course, we're in graduation season. So those who may have graduated and now looking to build their careers. The question that I would have for you is, though, what was the pivotal moment when you realized something was missing that needed to be addressed in leadership development?
It was the failure of leadership development.
Wow.
That was the pivotal moment. Yeah, I left MIT and I was at Hopkins doing my graduate work, ended up teaching there, and got attached to the executive MBA program. And I started hearing a lot of managers complaining about, the next theory of the month, the next change program, the next this, the next that. And they were complaining. They weren't like excited. They weren't like, oh, this is great. I'm going to learn how to be this kind of leader, or we're changing the culture of our company. This is wonderful. It was all disappointment and cynicism. And so they asked me to do a biological study to see, could this be something that's biological in our species? So I said, sure. And it seemed like a fun project. And that's what happened.
Wow. I think you said something that's key, though. I mean, again, you listened to others who were just complaining about the way things were going. But again,
Yes.
as you heard those complaints, the leader in you stood up and said, hey, I want to actually do something about it. What do you think that stems from? Is there something in your background or upbringing that you feel may have contributed or led to you making that particular decision?
I'm just a chronic learner, and I just love discovering things. And that's what really propelled me into the sciences and engineering. So when I was presented with a problem, it sounded exciting because I thought, if we can fix the problem, then we can impact the planet, at a higher degree, because the planet has leaders everywhere.
Yeah.
So if we can handle something of this nature, I think it could be dramatic, because we were having a lot of failure rates and companies and countries and politicians. And I thought, what if we could figure out what was going on here? And so I had sort of maybe an altruistic motive, but it was really just trying to learn and help.
Okay. So, and let's talk about it. So what was the most eye-opening thing for you as you dug in, did your research? What was the most eye-opening thing for you?
We learn more from the autopsies than studying successful companies. That was always interesting, because when I went through, and again, I was just starting. I didn't know anything about business. I was just asking questions. And when I began to see these success company lists that all these best-selling books had, and the list would change in as little as 18 to 36 months, I began to realize that studying successes probably isn't the way to go. So we started doing autopsies and studying your dead. And when we began studying your dead, we started seeing what was missing. And this led to a whole flurry of activity and research. So I began doing expeditions around the world in various remote regions to to study humans in different environments and validating some of the things that we were learning. So it really became kind of a fun research project that I've been doing now for over 20 years.
I've got to tell you, Don, I leaped on the inside when you talked about, learning more from the autopsies, because this thing has been just really swirling around in my head for the last few weeks. I'm like, how does he know that? But this thought has been in my head for the last few weeks on doing something around the fact that many times we don't feel like we can learn from those who have quite, quote, failed. We feel like we can only learn from those who've had success. For example, let's just say someone who's maybe been married and divorced a couple of times. We feel like, well, this person can't really tell me about marriage because they've been divorced a number of times. I'll just give you a well-known individual that most people speak of, mostly Steve Harvey. But I think someone who may have not maybe succeeded in marriages or quote unquote succeeded in marriage a number of times probably can teach you the best, because it's in hindsight many times that we reflect and we learn, just like you talked about what you learned from the autopsies. And a little bit off subject, but what do you think about something such as that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because it's part of my next book, which is coming out in the fall, on winners and losers. And the whole point was, it's for entrepreneurs. I decided to go from the corporate area more into taking what we learned in our research and put it into entrepreneurship. And I saw thousands of books out there and courses on entrepreneurs, but I wasn't seeing millions of new entrepreneurs. So I was trying to figure out like what was wrong. And I began to realize we're teaching people how to win, but we're not teaching them how to lose.
Well,
And what you're describing there is somebody that's lost enough and learned from it, gained some insight and wisdom that they didn't have earlier. And great entrepreneurs, contrary to what we see in the books, these entrepreneurs become successful. Richard Branson, successful entrepreneur, as an example. And everybody says, "Oh, this is what he did right. Here's what he did right." But I went back to look at what happened really. And in his past, he freely shares that he made a ton of mistakes.
yeah, yeah,
And I started seeing all these successful entrepreneurs were at the end of a path of mistakes, not successful decisions.
yeah.
But it was in the mistakes where they learned and they grew and they became resilient. So I thought, we should stop teaching winning the way we're teaching it and start teaching people how to lose powerfully. So I have this book called Winners and Losers, but I'm focusing on the losers part. Like, to be a great winner, you have to learn how to lose powerfully. And so that's sort of my next exciting research project.
Wow. Well, I look forward to talking to you about that one as well. So that leads me to my next question. I guess, what do you feel in today's fast-paced, business environment today, and ever changing? What do you feel are some of the attributes that leads to a CEO or leader of an organization being successful?
I think you have to be strategically acute, strategically aware. And I think we're teaching strategy wrong too.
Mm.
So, and I was part of the problem when I was at Hopkins in the graduate school. I was teaching analytical methods, SWOT analysis, competitor analysis, market analysis. It's all crap. It was just, they're useful but I'm finding that they're only useful for tactics. So we
Okay.
have a lot of CEOs. I train 700 CEOs a year, and then do a lot of keynote speaking at conferences. And also I do workshops inside companies. And each time I'm finding that most strategic plans are tactical plans. So
Mm.
I don't think we're teaching strategy right. So I think for success, you need to be able to achieve results. And to be able to achieve results, you better have a strategy for doing that.
Mhm.
And if that's missing, then there's going to be a problem. It was funny because I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek and the Start with Why stuff.
Uh-huh.
Well, his coach, the guy that helped launch him on the Why stuff, was Mark Levy, and he's my coach. So I hired Mark and said, "Tell me what the hell is going on with me, right?" And
Yeah.
he's the guy that came up with his winners and losers thing, because
Okay.
he's a great brand strategist. And I thought, wow, this is so he had to hammer me on the head about 6 months before I finally was like, "Oh, okay, I'm starting to get what you're saying." But in winning, it's like, yeah, you need to have a strategy for winning, and you need to know how to lose powerfully when the plan doesn't work out, because it's not going to work out.
Mhm.
It's always going to fail. Another thing we should teach. And I think that's the start of it. If you're not able to understand what winning means for you and how you're going to do it, then it's best to join another group or someone who's doing something you love,
Mhm.
and let them do that. Otherwise, how are you going to win, right? At the end of the day, that's what the job is, to
Yeah.
lead.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and talking about that, I guess one of the things that you often talk about in your book and in your speeches, that authenticity piece. I guess, what are some of the practical ways that you suggest individuals show up as their authentic selves, whether it's in leadership or any other role?
I guess engage people in the journey with you.
Mm.
The hardest CEOs we have to work with, which we don't take on as clients, is when somebody acts like they know everything. I mean, when you've reached the point where you know everything, that's the time to sell a business
Mhm.
because you're going to get outmaneuvered very easily.
Mhm.
People we love working with are the ones that are still exploring, still learning, still doubting, still, and I think those are the things that inspire me in working with leaders. And so I would encourage more of that. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm kind of going off on a tangent here.
Well, yeah, I wanted to get into that authentic piece because I think, we hear that floated so many times, just show up as your authentic self. But I think, many folks are still trying to get their head around, how do I do that? I want to do that, but how do I do that?
Well, I would start with that. I would just
And what do
start.
you mean?
Yeah, like, hey, I want to be authentic, but how do I do that? Like, in other words, that's authentic.
Okay. Yeah. The fact that you even desire to be so.
Yeah, I want to be more authentic. Is there a play? I mean, wouldn't it be an interesting conversation to have with your peers or your employees and say, look, I want to be authentic. I think I am, but am I doing something to make you think that I'm not?
Mhm.
I mean, where am I? What am I not saying, or how am I being in a way that makes it look like I'm not? Because I think I am, and I want to be. What a great conversation to
Yeah.
be
So you allow them
authentic.
to be like your mirror, so to speak, because you can't see yourself. So you allow them
Right.
to, who observe you most, to be able to kind of weigh in on that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I like that. I like that. So when you talk about working with leaders, what inspired you to start the Saga Leadership Institute?
I left Hopkins, and I knew that if I was going to do some of these expeditions around the world, it would be hard to get funding from a university because it's really hard to say, hey, I'm going to go to Asia or Africa or Southeast Pacific, and I need some money. And it's like, well, why? I'm like, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Well, what are you going to discover? I don't know. But so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to work and give all my money to research and fund my own work because I would go some places and have no idea what I'm doing there,
Yeah.
and always found something magical.
Wow.
I just hired local academics or local people that knew something about something, and then I would start filming and interviewing, and it's been just a fun time, just because for me, learning is fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work in my books and my speeches and in the work we do with companies to grow companies faster came out of a lot of field research like that.
Hmm.
So I've never come back from an expedition like, well, that was a waste of time. I didn't really learn anything. No, I'm
Yeah.
always so surprised about things that no one's ever questioned before, or secrets or nuances that were never explored. Like if I hire an anthropologist or a guide, I'm like, I tell them, like, if I see a tour bus, you're fired.
Yeah.
I don't want to see what everybody else is seeing. I can get that in a brochure. Show
Yes.
show me what you love.
I'm gonna go hang out with the locals.
Yes, yes, yeah.
So, you said something there that I thought was key. You talked about the fact that many times you go to places such as Africa, Japan, and other parts of Asia, and you didn't know what you were going for. I mean, certainly something had to be sparked an interest to say, let me go to this particular area, or not.
Yeah, it was, I wish I had something more intelligent to say about that. But it was like I just spin the globe and put my finger and say, you know what? Haven't been there before, but I can imagine the history and what it could learn. And then I would just set up and go. Or sometimes it'd be a friend say, hey, look, we've got an expedition through the Himalayas. We're going to visit this lost civilization, and why don't you hook up with us? I'm like, sure, that sounds like fun. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's people that I'm with will take me on things, and I'll just follow them along. Other times I'm just parachuting in on my own.
So, what trip, or would you say, was probably the most rewarding?
To Times Square, New York City.
Times Square in New York City. Okay. Was it the pizza or the hot dog?
It's funny. People ask me that question. I'm like, it's the only place in the world where you can be around 300 countries within 7 blocks.
That's true. That is true.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's just everybody's there. But no, it's
Including Spider-Man and Wonder Woman and all those other
exactly
costume
all the
characters.
superheroes. Yeah, so who can I love it? No, but seriously, I think every place I go, I find something marvelous and enticing. I've only been in a few places where I felt maybe unwelcome or
Mhm.
endangered. And I was in the Soviet bloc when it collapsed. I was around all that, but I still found, wonderful people, wonderful things going on, and learned a lot that helped, propel my research forward and my own insights about myself. So it's really, yeah, it's hard for me to say this place, but not that place, because you could take me to I don't know, a totally, um, not necessarily dangerous, but maybe an area which people would say, why would you go there?
Mhm.
And you'll find the most wonderful people.
Yeah.
I learned something from everywhere I go. But the point is to learn something that I can share, that I can
Mhm.
teach, that I can use to help entrepreneurs do something more powerful or grow companies faster.
Mhm.
I mean, I've had clients that have grown 2 or 3 times or 10 times their size within a few years using these techniques, which is, why I've trained over 30,000 CEOs, and hopefully I'll train a few more
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the time I have
Well,
left.
I asked you that question because I have a mentor that I work with, and he talks all the time about how traveling is broadening. And you've had the opportunity to do an extensive amount of travel, so I would imagine that you've learned a lot. So the name of the book, The Code of the Executive: 47 Ancient Samurai Principles Essential for 21st Century Leadership Success. Don, I guess I'll ask you, of the book, I guess what's that one key insight or strategy that you feel would really help CEOs enhance their management skills or leadership?
Death.
Okay. I saw that's a very interesting chapter.
Yeah, it was the first when Oxford gave me permission to use this ancient manuscript that was written centuries ago to train executives. I looked at that manuscript and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be difficult to teach.
Mhm.
But I found that they were really teaching something neurologically important, even though they did not have the sciences.
Mhm.
But the only way to achieve bravery and honor is to unhook the ego, what they call the evil spirit. And the best way they could do that is to remember that someday you must die, and always remember that constantly. So that was like the source of samurai training, was to
Mhm.
keep in mind that you must die. Then the rest of the book was like what happens when you forget that sentence.
Mhm.
And so later on at Hopkins, I started looking at brain research, and then I got involved with evolutionary psychology and genetics, and began to realize that the evil spirit, the selfishness, actually is part of a good strategy for genetic warfare, because selfishness keeps an animal, a species alive, and the more so selfish animals stay alive longer, and therefore they have more opportunity to replicate their data, and that's the game.
Mhm.
But when we get into leadership and higher forms than just biological warfare, it becomes interesting where we have to let that ego go. So the death thing, I think, tells the brain, and I want to fund this research. If anybody's out there is listening, wants to help me fund this, I want to go to Hopkins and do brain scans of terminally ill patients and those people that meditate on the samurai philosophy. And I think the brain scans are going to be identical. I think the ego will have unhooked in both cases. And so that's the pattern that we began teaching executive teams how to die properly. And when we did that, their decision rate went up by magnitudes. I mean, they can make
Okay.
a 5-minute decision that would have taken 5 weeks. And that's when we knew we were onto something from this ancient samurai work. And it actually ended up in my next book, High Altitude Leadership, with Chris Warner. Because when we did high altitude leadership, it was on the K2 summit where he's studying actual people dying or
Mhm.
people that had already died.
Mhm.
And in that respect, we began to see similar patterns. So, what an interesting laboratory. I mean, to be in death zone environments and do leadership studies at this level. But anyway, I was just fortunate to run into Chris on an expedition he was leading in the Andes. And so, yeah, I would think death becomes really an overlooked but pivotal area of leadership research we need to study more.
Okay. So I want to unpack this a little bit more. So you talked about the fact that based on the principles that you guys share with these leaders, they're able to make a decision in 5 minutes that normally would have taken 5 weeks. What practical, and I guess in layman's terms, I guess what is it you're teaching them that allow them to be able to make that decision quicker?
It was really them teaching themselves and leading them through a process where you look at what's causing us to be slow. And I'll do this 700 times a year with different companies. And, in groups, it's like, what's slowing you down? And it's all this dysfunctional political behavior that's going on. And so from that, I ask how much time is being wasted. And it's usually a range of 20 to 80%, but 50% is like an average. So what if you take half of what you're wasting and all that bull crap, that ego-based behavior, and applied it to results? So what we do is we try to look at the beliefs that are driving those old behaviors. And then what are the new beliefs that to drive the new behaviors? And I'm collapsing 2 days of an experience into like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the thing is to commit suicide. It's the death thing, the suicide to those old beliefs.
Hmm.
So we have a process and methodologies to do that. And it's not fun. I mean, we tell them, look, this is not going to be fun. Maybe you don't want to do this.
Mhm.
Because if you do this to get to the other side, you're never going to want to come back, but it's just
Yeah.
going to be painful to get there
Yeah.
because you have to kill beliefs that you're embracing, that are been part of your life maybe, yeah, for a very long time, and you need to commit suicide. And so that's the journey that the samurai, from what we learned from them, anyway.
Okay. Okay. In closing, the name of the podcast is Principles for Success. I guess, what are your top 3 success principles that you would recommend to anyone looking to grow in terms of personal development or leadership development?
Well, I think the death thing is good. Always, I have 100 deaths a day. I have to give up
Mhm.
100 things that I thought were true.
And I
Uh,
guess, so just so we'll unpack that for everyone, you're saying die to your ego, die to
yes,
the selfishness, the selfishness that,
yes.
excludes others and things of that nature.
Yeah, and a lot of religions actually use this as part of their practice. So I would think that's something a leader should do: is always grow, always give up what's holding you back, and achieve what's next. And the second thing, I just keep learning. Never stop learning. And then the third thing would probably be what I want to expand more in my next book. The Japanese phrase: 7 times down, 8 times up. Always get up. Always
Wow.
get up, always keep moving, always learn. And that's, yeah. And so the more that I learn, I'll put more on the website. If they want to go to sagaleadership.com, we stole that from the Vikings. I'm always stealing things from these ancient civilizations. But, Saga, SAGA, leadership.com. I'm trying to get more and more out there so people can, download like ways to look at things and do your own journey, really. And that's where it is.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much for allowing us to, go on journeys that we may not otherwise go, other than from learning from your books and teachings and speakings and things of that nature. So, really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right, Don. We will look forward to speaking to you when that next book comes out. In the meantime, take care of yourself.
Thank you. You too.
All right.